You know, when you step in front of your ensemble and say, play loud, well, they know how to do that. You say, play this scale, they know how to do that. Play this rhythm, they know how to do that. But if you stand in front of your ensemble and you say, play this passage with expression and musicality, most young musicians have no idea where to begin or even how to begin. Playing with expression is an abstract concept. Over the years, I've relied on 3 attributes of expression to serve as a conceptual jumping off point. When I step in front of a new band, or even with my own ensemble here at Lee, on the first day of the semester, this is what I talk about. The first concept of expression. All notes do not weigh the same. All notes do not weigh the same. Small notes don't weigh as much as big notes. Less significant notes weigh less than more significant notes. And basically the concept is that smaller notes always lead to larger notes. Less significant notes move to more significant notes. And when I say lead, I'm usually referring to a crescendo. If I had, for instance, 4 eighth notes and a half note, I mean, we realize that the eighth notes are this light and the half notes this big. I wouldn't go da 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 da. No, I'd go da 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 da. I'd musically move to them. I'd crescendo, small notes to large notes. It has nothing to do with strong and weak beats. It has everything to do with note values in a melodic line. Smaller note values move to larger note values. Less significant note values move to more significant note values. The second concept is this, that all music moves forward. All music moves forward. However, most young people think it moves forward note to note. Most music, all music, moves forward point to point. You know, a musical phrase starts somewhere and it goes somewhere. And we have to help our students look beyond the small and look to the larger picture. An analogy I always use is that every morning I leave my house and go to school. When I pull out of my driveway and put my car in drive, I am no longer at home. I am on my way to school. As soon as you play your first note, you are no longer at home. You are on your way to somewhere else. Music always moves forward, point to point. The third concept is a little more difficult to understand. It is this: the contour of the line dictates its dynamics. There's a small book by the founder of the Vandercook School of Music called Expression in Music. Dates around 1926. It's a delightful book, and it deals with the perceived correct way to play musical gestures and rhythms and articulations, etc. At one point in the book, Mr. Vandercook indicates that, and I paraphrase this, lines that go up crescendo and lines that go down decrescendo. Well, I believe a modern translation of this concept is this: the contour of the line dictates its dynamics. Now notice I say dynamics and not dynamic. At face value, this concept says that a dynamic marking at the beginning of a phrase is good for one note and one note only, the first one. And the contour of the line after that will either decrease or increase the scope of the dynamic. If a line does this, so does the dynamic. Now this is a hard one. This is a hard one for young people to grasp, because in the world of band festival competition, there is no room for dynamic diversity. We have put dynamic levels in a very narrow bandwidth, and we've sealed the borders against any diversion. And we have pianissimo, piano, mezzo forte, forte, etc. However, if we really believe this final concept, It will mean that melodies will actually break through the crust of one dynamic, perhaps even bump against another before it comes back down to Mother Earth, so to speak. This certainly flies in the face of conventional wisdom at music contests, I know. But the deal is, I don't think a blended sound is supposed to be an homogenized sound. Just as colors leap from the canvas of a great painting, I think timbres and lines need to leap past the front of the stage and literally slap the audience in the face. All notes do not weigh the same. All music moves forward point to point, and the contour of the line dictates its dynamics. These three attributes are not just about the melodic line, they're about all the lines in a composition. And each are not a law unto themselves. We'll find as we go further today that there will be many times that a combination or a portion of each attribute will really affect the selection we make in any given phrase. However, we're going to first of all start today by applying it to a piece of music that's totally melodically driven. And we're going to see what happens when we employ these concepts of musical expression. We're going to move to the rehearsal hall for just a minute and try this out. We're going to play the first 8 measures of my composition entitled Adagio. The first 8 measures are melodically driven. There is no counterpoint, and the dynamic level is pianissimo. And this is the usual interpretation you will hear of that 8-bar phrase. Obviously, the 8 measures you heard consisted of 4 2-measure sequence. Each sequence contained a half note, 2 quarter notes, half note, except for the last measure, which had, of course, a cadential whole note. We're going to play that 8 bars again for you. Only this time we're going to add those attributes of expression that we have been talking about. First of all notes do not weigh the same. Smaller notes always lead to larger notes. So we're going to ask the musicians in those measures that have the half note and 2 quarters that they will crescendo through those 2 quarter notes to the following half note. All music moves point to point. So we're going to ask the musicians not to think of this as 4 2-bar phrases, but to think of it instead as one 8-bar phrase that starts at this point and extends to this point. But because that phrase does do this, it does have a contour. That brings in the third attribute we've talked about, that the contour of the line will dictate its dynamics. It'll be a slightly different interpretation you will hear if we add all these things. Obviously, utilizing these attributes will allow us to have a rather expanded interpretation of music. Now, when I first wrote about these concepts of expression in the chapter in the Composers on Composing for Band, I did get some questions. And the main question I got was this: if this is the way I want the music to be played, or if this is the way composers intend for their music to be played, why don't we mark the music accordingly? I have 2 answers. Occasionally, I have a young musician walk up to me and ask, "Mr. Holsinger, how do I finger this part?" And my answer is, it's not my problem. My problem was to write the part, and yours is to figure out how to play the part. Now, I'm not being silly. It's just, conductors, I want you to have a part in the music making. I want you to have a chance to decide what will happen in that particular phrase or section. I want to trust your musical gifting. My problem was to write it, and your problem is to make it come alive. Why don't I mark all these conceptual designs on the music page? Because if I did, this is what it would look like. And we would have one more mechanical aspect to music, something the band world does not need. In our next section, we're going to return to the rehearsal hall, and we're going to look at On a Hymn Song of Philip Bliss. If you have the score, now would be a good time to retrieve it. So we'll see you back in the rehearsal hall.